So, The Exorcist Believer is a revival, reboot slash soft sequel, I guess. It's similar to David Gordon Green's new Halloween trilogy, where it's trying to tell a new story, but it's also recognizing like the first film as part of like the continuity and going with it from there. Now, here's the thing: like Universal and Blumhouse spent a lot of money to make a new series of Exorcist films. Like they spent a ridiculous amount of money on this stuff. So they're counting on, I think they're counting on The Exorcist being like the same type of trilogy as Halloween, where the new Halloween trilogy made a lot of money. Unfortunately, it's off to a very, very, very rough start. The problem, I think, with The Exorcist Believer is that it never quite settles on the type of film that it wants to be. You get an idea of like where it might be going, and then it divulges into so many paths and just splinters off with so many characters that it just becomes a convoluted mess by the end. Because I mean, it starts off well enough. Like it starts off with the story of Victor Fielding, played by Leslie Odom Jr., who tragically loses his wife, and he's only able to save his child after his wife dies during childbirth amid a earthquake in Haiti. Years later, his daughter grows up, his daughter named Angela, played by Lydia Jewett, and they have a good relationship. Like they set it up where it's like we get to know and like them a little bit. Similar in essence to the first Exorcist film, we were given enough time to get to know and like this family where we want to care for them once the big demon possession comes about. Because we all see where this is going. Eventually she's going to get possessed by a demon, and this family is going to have like, its values challenged. Now, there's a lot that you can play with just on that. Like, you have this idea of, like, Victor being this single father. He's lost his faith. He doesn't really find much to be hopeful for except his daughter, and he's got to try to learn to bring others into his heart. You could build on that. And the film presents those themes and those aspects where it could build up something through there. The problem is it just throws a whole lot of other stuff at the screen. Like it throws like early on in the film there's a baptism that just happens to Angela's mother, and that's apparently going to protect her through all this. There's another girl thrown into the mix here. So like Angela, the whole idea behind like the demon possession is that Angela goes into the woods with her friend, and they both end up getting possessed by demons. So in addition to, Angela experiencing all the typical exorcism stuff where, she acts all creepy around the house, she does bizarre stuff like with, pissing the bed and stuff like that, and there's blood in the tub and just randomly appearing throughout the house, just doing all the standard spooky exorcism girl stuff. But then you have another girl thrown into the mix who, she comes from a much more religious family that for some reason, which is never quite explained, it's just kind of like tossed out there, is that she was never baptized even though she's from a highly religious family. So like there is something to draw from there, like like this questioning about if your beliefs are true or if they're just like kind of like a virtue signaling element. There's a clash that you could build on through there, but the film doesn't have time for that either, because it also wants to introduce aspects from the first exorcism film by bringing Ellen Burstyn back to talk about like Reagan. So basically like she comes back more or less to kind of play the same role as Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, where she comes back and she's mostly like, yeah, I've been there. Yep, I've seen this all. So it's mostly just, she observes and she does all that. Yeah, I'm familiar with all this, and I can guide you a little bit, but and the thing is, that could be cool too, but unfortunately her role is mostly just there to dole out these simplistic monologues on the aspects of confronting evil. Which is pretty sad, because like it just comes off like just like as a shameless cameo, to the point where you could throw anyone into the mix. You could invent an entirely different character to do the exact same thing, and I think it would actually hold a lot more weight, because the way that it comes off here, it's just like, okay, she recognizes Reagan, and if you're like, I guess this is minor spoiler here, but if you are looking forward to Reagan, she does come back. You will get to see Linda Blair, but in a very kind of like last minute, like pretty much an afterthought of like a nostalgic inclusion. It comes off, yeah. And so many other aspects of this film just do not work. In particular, once you get to the third act of this film, where the two girls are finally, they've gone too far, they've hurt people, they've observed them, they can't find anything wrong with them, and they need that spiritual intervention of an exorcism. There's too much going on. And what I mean by that is they bring in so many spiritual leaders to combat this. Like, you have a former nun, who's a current nurse, played by Ann Dowd, who you might recognize her from The Handmaid's Tale, in which she also plays like a conflicted religious person who's just like, like she's like, oh, my beliefs. She's like, it's kind of sad. It feels like she's typecasted as like the same character that she was in The Handmaid's Tale. But in addition to that, you also have like a ritualistic healer. You have a Baptist who comes in here. You have a pastor. You have a priest. Like, they have all these spiritual forces that combine together. Like, it's almost kind of like a joke the way it's like, like a ritualistic healer, a Baptist, and a pastor and a father all converge on an exorcism with these two girls, and goes from there. And especially, I want to harp on just like the third act here, when they're trying to take the demon out of these girls. It fluctuates between so many different things. Like, at first it feels like it's a matter of like unity. Then it's a matter of like, like spiritual connection with others, even if you don't share their beliefs. Then it comes down to an acceptance of, the way that life proceeds, and just, being content with that. Then it becomes just more about just straight up, just like the key to it all was just a baptism. And it's like, it's so all over the place, and none of it, if I feel like if this film maybe had an extra hour, it might have been able to better explore these aspects and make them interconnect better, because you can see all the puzzle pieces here of a good exorcism film, but like it feels like they're from different puzzles and all just like smashed together to try to just like, it feels like they're just throwing everything at the screen and seeing what sticks. And unfortunately, most of it doesn't, because it darts all around this, but all around this film, between like, recognizing the first exorcism film, contemplating the nature of demons, like looking at the nature of the paranormal, questioning spirituality, questioning unity, questioning family, questioning neighbors, like the conflict between being religious and not being religious, being baptized and not being baptized. And it's too much, to the point where even like the demon getting into Angela is just inexplicable. But I think the one thing that frustrates me the most about Believer is the fact that we don't get to see a lot of Angela in the possessed demon state doing all like the bizarre and like, crazy demon possession stuff that Reagan did in The Exorcist. And I think, like, this is just my theory, but I feel like the reason that they don't have as much of it in the film is because of the simple fact that kids being possessed by demons is funny. It just is. And if you want proof of this, you can go back to a film earlier this year called the Pope's Exorcist, which is just it's so uproarious. Like it's campy, it's ridiculous, like, and it's very much tongue in cheek. Like it feels like it's walking that line, like it's trying to be serious, but it's just so absurd, with just like this kid being possessed by a demon, saying all these foul things, doing all this ridiculous violence, and just cussing up a storm. That just it's so funny. And even if you go back and watch the first Exorcist film, like a lot of older people tell you how much how scary the first Exorcist film is, and it's mostly the people who first saw it when it came out. And back then, yeah, sure, it was I imagine it was pretty scary back then. But you go back and watch it now, and you can't help but laugh. Like here's and I think it's just because like you're thinking, okay, if I was a kid and I was in this situation, like if I got this role, I would be hamming it up. I would have so much fun being possessed by a demon, saying all the things I couldn't, doing all the things I couldn't. It would just be hilarious. And I think like the problem with Exorcist Believers, I think it wants to take the demon possession seriously, so it tries to downplay as much of that as possible. So we don't get as much of Angela and her friend, doing all the crazy exorcism stuff. Which is sad, because like the few times that it does happen, like you can tell they're trying to be, a little bit more earnest and stern with it rather than just going for the laughs. But really, it's kind of impossible, because like, you can't help but laugh at some of the scenes where just like the lights go out and just bam, Angela's there. You can't help but laugh at, that she pisses the bed. She starts up, like the bathtub with water, and for some reason there's blood in it now, and just Angela's friend walking through the church covered in blood and just like saying grotesque stuff and stabbing out eyeballs. It's silly. But the problem is, I don't think it's silly enough. I think like this is a film that it doesn't want to embrace the campy nature of demon-possessed kids, because like it's unavoidable. You can try to make it serious, you can try to make it stern, but the fact of the matter is, like, in this day and age, like a film about someone being possessed by a demon is usually either going to be ridiculous or kind of like standard supernatural boring stuff. Like there's a few films that have kind of broken through the mold, but they're usually aiming for something a bit higher. And I think with just all the messy themes that are never built up or paid off in Exorcist Believer, it just comes off as just a lackluster, lukewarm, and just like, constantly contradicting it. It's constantly contradicting itself to the point where I don't even know what the film is trying to say by the end. Even when it gets to Ann Dowd making this, making this statement that she gives to police on like the nature of evil and learning to live with the world that we're given, it just comes off as just kind of just like a bland platitude to go out on, where it feels like most of this film was just about, showcasing a few familiar Exorcist stuff, like, in terms of like other characters and familiar kills, including like, I will give the film this. There was a good quality kill where they do like, like the head twisting that's usually associated with The Exorcist, and somebody gets their head twist who shouldn't be twisting their neck that way. That was an okay kill. But when all you can really give me is like an okay kill, and you're downplaying much of the silly elements, which are usually more fun, I think. I think if they embraced more of that, it'd be much more fun film. Because in trying to come off as like an earnest contemplation on faith and spirituality, I don't think you can do much with that, especially since a lot of like paranormal horror of this nature, it usually kind of follows a pretty rigid track. And you can kind of like see this film trying to like veer off the different sides and explore more, but it never goes that extra mile. It never goes that extra length to make all these different themes and all the characters thrown into the mix pay off. And it just sadly doesn't work. And the fact that this is going to be part of a new trilogy, it's not a good start for this new Exorcism film trilogy. I honestly don't know who knows? Like, this was pretty bad, but maybe the next two films will learn their lesson and actually improve. But right now, it's just like The Exorcist Believer is all over the place, and it's an incoherent mess that can never decide quite what it wants to be, outside of just being a film where some girls get possessed by some demons, and they do wicked stuff for a little bit, and then acknowledge all the other Exorcist films. So yeah, it's sad that this is the start of a new Exorcist series.